Good evening, Australia. Welcome to the show. Tough times never last, but tough people do. You know, over the years, we've had so many down-to-earth and authentic people on the couch, people who've served time behind bars, people who are suicidal. We've had people who were in the Bali bombings, all sorts of people. But that's what I love about people who are authentic. It seems to me wherever you go these days, everyone's wearing their social mask saying, "How are you? Are you busy? What are you doing for Christmas?" When really 1 in 3 people are suffering from depression or anxiety, you know. I think it's very important to be authentic. On tonight's couch, a terrific fella, Ricky Nixon. He needs no introduction. Grew up in Bendigo. Ricky, must have been great growing up in Bendigo, you know. Country people are usually decent people.
I must admit, we'll probably get onto it a little bit later, my grandmother was my idol when I grew up and took me to the footy every week, and that, like, when I think about my childhood and growing up, it was just great days. I was very lucky to have great friends and great schools that I went to, and ended up realising my dream and playing AFL footy and that sort of thing. But I guess the thing is that it has been a tough 4 or 5 years for me, and at times, I was in very dangerous places in a dark dungeon. And I guess I always throw up when I speak every week all around Australia that stand up in the room if you've never made a mistake. You've made them.
We've made them. And we've all sinned, we've all lied, we've all done things we're not proud of. In fact, I've got good mates who are very successful, but if we found out all the things they've done, they'd be doing 7 life terms back to back. But Ricky, everyone who knows you says you're humble, you're kind-hearted, but you can also be very powerful when it comes to coaching people. Now, how did you fall into the management side?
It's actually interesting because this year there's been some criticism, say, of Collingwood Football Club and how they've played. And where that relates to me is I didn't realise that my greatest asset was I used to be a teacher, a phys ed teacher. People don't know that, for 8 years at Carey Grammar in Kew. And that taught me to manage. And when I say that, the students, whether it be male or female, you had to understand how they learnt, whether they was quick, whether they could retain things, etc. In football coaching, it's the same. Now, it's no coincidence that at the Hawthorn, I think it's 11 of their 15 assistant coaches have had teaching backgrounds. Have a look at that club. They've produced 6 senior coaches in the competition, or 7, I think, at the moment. And that teaching experience that I had was fantastic when it took me back to managing players, because I used it. It was great.
There's been a lot of player managers over the years, but everyone says you were one of the best. You really made a huge difference. What was your point of difference, do you think?
I think my greatest asset was brutal honesty, I suppose, or black and white, and also having an understanding that it makes every player ticks differently. And I think I was good at recognising and I always remember the great Gary Ablett, Senior. There was some people at Geelong Footy Club who were questioning why he was late for training and all that sort of thing. And when he retired, I said I could get him jobs on the footy show and everything else. And I'll never forget, he said, "Come down to Geelong, I want to take you out fishing." And I said, "I don't want to go fishing." He said, "No, you've got to come out fishing." So we went out on the boat and he said, "Rick, can I just say something to you?" He said, do you understand that I don't want to be like everybody else? I just want to be Gary Ablett. So everyone wants to make him, like Sam Newman, or make him like Eddie McGuire, but he doesn't want to do that stuff. And I've always respected that you can't force people to do what they don't want to do just because we idolise them or they're great players. And Gary's always been a great friend to me, and he's had his ups and downs with a lot of things, and I totally respect the confidential nature of that, and I'll always be there for Gary, and I'm sure he's always there for me.
No, I remember a lot of the players looked up to you almost like a big brother or an uncle, like a family member, You might remember many years ago the Whitnell brothers were having big feuds, but yes. you sort of get involved in much more than... It's almost like sometimes you've got to sort out family problems, don't you?
Yeah, well, look, it's, at the moment, ironically, I run an online How to Be a Sports Agent course, which I've done for 20 years. Yeah. And it's into week 2 just at the moment of 6. And last week, the first week, I discussed how you don't just manage a player. You've got wife, partner, family, husband, mother, father, grandparents, siblings, and they don't all get along necessarily. Some get along fantastically. Some are jealous. There can be family issues that affect a player dramatically when he goes out. Like, you wouldn't believe how many players I dealt with whose one of the parents had cancer, and they're dying, and he's trying to play each week in front of 100,000, and people are bagging him because he's playing in a bottom team. Footballers are like everybody everybody else who walk down the street. There's people who could be a Prime Minister, and there's people capable of murdering someone. And you just have to manage that the best you can.
Ricky, talking about managing, you're very good at dealing with crisis and getting on top of crisis. And isn't it amazing how life can turn from parties and everyone loving you to all of a sudden this negative media attention? And but you handled that so nicely and so well. But what happened?
Oh, look, I mean, I guess the easiest way, Mick, to describe it is I made a big mistake, and I'll have to live with that with the rest of my life. I went to a hotel room to meet a girl that I never should have gone there. Now, people would argue, I suppose, who have read my book, that clearly it was entrapment and you were set up and there was a media person waiting outside the hotel, but it doesn't matter. I still went there. So, you can say it was a set-up and all that, but I went there and I let my wife and 2 kids down. And, my 2 biggest supporters have been my wife and 2 kids. They've just been brilliant to me, Jude and Mitch and Lewis, and every day stood by me through all of it. What people don't realise with media stories is they only ever tell one side, the side that the public want to believe.
Of course.
And, it doesn't matter what I say about the hotel room, because everybody thinks, from the cameraman to you, they know what happened, so it doesn't matter anymore. But
no.
What I will say is, when I was 15, I lived in Bendigo. Grew up with a little fat kid, I shouldn't say that, but Tubby, Greg Williams, who went on to win 2 Brownlows at Carlton and Sydney, great player. And this guy, Tony Southcombe, who was the best country footballer, he actually said, if you want to play AFL, I've got to make you the 2 fittest kids in Australia, so I'm going to take you out to this hill, One Tree Hill, which is ironically near where my parents lived, family home was. It was about 4 kilometres to the top, and I was a little athletics champion, so I ran straight to the top the first night. It took Greg like a month. Got to the top and he's down laying on the ground. I was saying, Greg, well done, mate. He goes, Rick, why do you always run to the top? And I said, because that's where Tony told us to run to. And he goes, but you're better than that. So the next night I ran up the hill and 9 kilometres around the bush tracks till I got back to my parents' house. I did it every night until I played AFL football 18 months later. And that, when I look back, was the making of my determination and life. And I learnt every day that you get out of bed and get on with it. So I know, Michael, you're saying you cop the media pounding, but I every day people say, how do you do it? How do you do it? And how I do it is simply you get up the next day when you've got tough times and get on with it.
And we might talk about your football career. I'm very excited, and how you took that discipline into your next life. But we'll be back shortly, and back very shortly with a great man, Ricky Nixon. Don't go away. Thank you very much for tuning in. The great man, Ricky Nixon, down to earth, authentic, and you know what? He's a really, really good bloke. And isn't it amazing? 98%, 99 maybe, of the stuff he's done, dedicated. He's helped so many people, and there's so many things we haven't seen, going the extra mile, and sort of helping a lot of people become sporting superstars. And then, of course, one thing and the media picks up on it, turns it into a big snowball, and all of a sudden, but that's unfortunately the small world. The big people still love him. They love his authenticity, but the small-minded people, well, back then they read the papers, and only stupid people believe what's on the papers. But what happened after all that rubbish?
It's interesting what you say, Michael.
Yeah.
When I go out and speak each week, I get a lot of mature women come up to me and say, I used to hate you, but what you just said tonight was amazing. And I go, I used to be offended by it, but now I realise that they didn't know any other side to the story. So why they can only believe what they read. I think most people realise now, with the advent of social media and everything else, it's distorted to a ridiculous level. But when the actual hotel room that I went to happened, the media was like, I had 150 media outside my house. They were following my kids to school. There was a helicopter over my house at one stage. It's like, you'd think I'd killed a busload of nuns. I mean, I define, there's a lot of people in this world who've been to a hotel room and done something wrong in their life, and that's the thing. It's the amount of people who say to me, Ricky, God, if the media knew what I've done compared to what you've done. But what it led to was I went to a good mate said, why don't you get out of Melbourne? My wife was in hiding with the kids, couldn't go to school, and he said, why don't you go to Ireland? You go there every year in February, which is when this happened, and do your recruiting and get away from the media. I said, good idea. So I caught a plane to London to get an adjourning flight to Dublin.
That's where you disappeared to.
Yeah, and when I got there, though, a very good friend who I won't name, but he texted me. I got a text from him saying, don't go to Dublin. The media are waiting for you. Come straight to this hotel room. I need to see you. I said, all right. So I went there, and he said, look, mate, I've got to go to Paris for a week, but I've paid for a hotel room for 10 days. Just don't get yourself in any trouble. Lock the doors, da-da-da-da-da. I said, okay. Went and got the reception, got the keys, turned around, there's a guy dressed very similar to you in a beautiful suit, and he said, are you right, mate? And I said, why? Why do you say that? He goes, are you right? And he went like that. And he had like 100 bags of cocaine. And I said, and I never took drugs in my life, ever. Like playing football or any of that sort of thing. But I was starting to struggle big time. And people don't realise my number one client had died in his sleep the year before. And that number one client wasn't Wayne Carey and it wasn't Gary Ablett. There was a guy called Clinton Gribus, who was the up-and-coming media star in Australia. When I found him, he was earning $30,000. I told him within a year I'd earn him $300,000. He was earning $1 million in the first year that I managed him. So when I say my number one client, he was paying me the most amount of management fees, but he was earning a lot of money. He came to my office one day and he had a busted ear and a cut eye and a black eye. I said, oh my God, it's 2 weeks before Christmas. What happened? And he said, I think someone broke into my apartment and tried to bash me. I said, mate, that can't happen. You live on the 27th floor of a building right in the city and there's security down the bottom. So we went back to his unit and all we could find out was on his balcony was blood on the railing, that he must have tripped and been sleepwalking. So I said, mate, you need to go and see a doctor. This isn't right. And he said, yeah, it's funny, they found me out in the lift 3 days ago asleep. I said, oh, this isn't right. Anyway, 2 days before Christmas, I rang him and said, how'd you go to the doctor? And he said, oh, the doctor said there's nothing wrong with me. And I said, mate, oh, good, have a great Christmas, catch you later. Hung up. 4 days later, I was on the beach with my wife at Point Lonzo. We had a holiday house, and my phone rang, and it was Graham Mott from 3AW, where Clinton worked. And I said, Jude, Clinton's dead. And she said, what? I said, Clinton's dead. Graham Clinton's dead. He goes, how do you know that? I said, I've just had this awful feeling that something was wrong. And where I'm going to on this is, I actually drove straight back to Melbourne that day. Clinton had died in his sleep, 32 years of age. More than 2,000 men under 30 die each year in Australia.
Is that right?
Your heart just stops.
Jeez.
And people don't know it. So I actually did my head in from that day that, if that was Wayne Carey or that was Gary Ablett, I would have checked that he went to the doctor and I didn't. And I don't know, people would say, well, it's not your fault, you can't control everything, but I was a control freak and I used systems and processes. So for a year, I started drinking, I started doing cocaine, and I admit to it, a lot of people are in denial in the media who are on it, and businessmen these days, but get out of denial. Yeah. And what happened was that after that incident with the girl, I went to London, the guy came out, went like that, so this is where the cocaine kept going. And then this girl rang and started talking, and I took the call and answered it, and when I hung up, I won't say who it is, but a policeman rang me saying, don't speak to that girl, it's being taped by 60 Minutes. And I went, God. Oh my God, you've got to be kidding.
God, people are selfish.
I left my hotel room, went across the road to a park. And I don't know if you've ever been to parks in London, but they close at 10 o'clock at night. I didn't know that. It's now 11 o'clock. I tried to get out. I was locked in. And I'm like, oh my God, my life's just turning into a mess. So I walked down a pathway, climbed up on a tree, and went to jump off. And I'd been doing cocaine for 10 days. I hadn't slept. I was seeing things in the air. I was paranoid. I was this and that. And when I went to jump off the fence, I dived into the footpath and crushed my shoulder and cut my face and I went, that's it. And I'm sure people watching this would say everyone goes through tough times, and I'm sure a lot of people would have said, I want to end it all. Well, that night I wanted to end it all, and I walked down the River Thames, walked down the bridge, and I was going to jump. And I looked down at the water, and my two sons, Mitch and Lewis, were looking up, going, Dad, don't do it. And I said, no, I've got to go, boys. And then my wife rang, so I hung up on her. And then I went to jump again, and Mitch goes, don't do it, Dad. And my wife rang Jude again and said, what are you doing? I said, what am I doing? I'm on a bridge, and I'm just about to jump. She goes, that's right, you selfish prick. Get off the bridge and get back here and start thinking about your sons. And that was the night that changed my life a fair bit. I staggered out to the airport, came back to Australia. And, I'll just shorten this part up, Michael, but it's when I got back to Australia, I was staying in a hotel room, separated from my wife and kids, but talking to them. And Sam Newman, who's been a good friend, rang and said, mate, what are you doing in a hotel room? He said, mate, you're a smart bloke. you've gone to you've stuffed up. You made a mistake, but we all do.
Yeah.
Your true friends believe in you.
Yeah.
Get out and enjoy your life. So I went out that night with a few friends to a hotel, and when I walked in, this girl came up to me, and I ended up with her that night, and this is where I was in braid fade territory, thinking it was a trophy. She was a supermodel stuff. It was stupid. I realised after a while that this wasn't any future in this relationship. No. She left 8 weeks later, came back to my apartment at 2 o'clock in the morning. There was an argument. Next day I was front page of the newspaper again. All misreported, by the way. But I got a phone call. I don't know if people are watching this. If you've been through tough times and you're gambling, you're taking drugs, you're drinking too much, it doesn't matter. When your friends say you got to stop, you don't. And when they say to you, how much are you doing? You say this much when you're really doing this much. I got a call that day from Peter Moore, who's a Brownlow medalist. His son Darcy plays at Collingwood now, who I actually coached in junior footy. And I can only think to this day the reason I answered his call was he was above me, if that makes sense. So I respected him. And that's no disrespect to my friends. So he said, Rick, I don't know what happened last night, but all I know is, mate, your 2 kids don't deserve this. You're going to the doctor at 9 o'clock tomorrow morning. I've booked you in.
Amazing how you said that. But we might talk about that recovery after the next break. But thanks so much for sharing. We'll be back shortly. Ricky Nixon's on the couch. You know, I've been a criminal defence lawyer I've been around the criminal justice system since 1986 as a cop, then prosecuting and a defence lawyer. I've seen a lot of pedophiles. I've seen a lot of drug dealers. I've seen a lot of assaults. I've seen people being killed. I've domestic violence, people bashing each other. But no, this man's a terrific fella. He's a very high achiever. A lot of discipline. Has helped a lot of people. And that one little thing out of all the beautiful things he's done is just, amazing. And I think that everything happens for our maximum benefit, that it's taught you so much that it'll hurdle. Yeah. But what happened when you went to the doctor, Ricky?
Yeah, well, look, I guess for those people who are going through a tough time, I got there and he was very blunt. He said, Rick, if you keep going the way, you're going to be dead in 2 weeks. Yeah. And I said, yeah. He said, look, I think I want to send you to Currumbin Clinic on the Gold Coast. And the reason for it is throw your mobile phone in the bin, get away from the media, get up there where it's sunny. Currumbin Clinic's for mental health and addiction. And that was the day I got out of denial. I said, amazing. I've got to go. And he said, well, there's only one catch, Rick. He said, have you got 30 grand? I said, oh, my God, I've just lost $7 million.
Oh, my God.
Yeah, that's how much it cost me. Like, I didn't do anything illegal, nothing. It cost me $7 million and lost my 20-year business. I had 29 staff had to be retrenched overnight. The banks came in and called my loans back in because I didn't have a job. The legal bills, it was just ridiculous. The doctor said, have you got private health insurance? And I said, I've been paying it for 26 years. I just stopped paying it 6 months ago.
God.
And he said, well, mate, you're going to have to find someone to sponsor you. I said, so I went out there a little bit up. First time I was out of denial, and I thought, I've got some friends who have got a lot of money. I reckon someone will lend me the 30 grand. Yeah. So I rang Jude, my wife. I said, Jude, going to Currumbin. She goes, I think it's fantastic, Rick. I'll support you 100%. I said, only one problem. It's going to cost 30 grand. I haven't got 30 grand or I haven't got any private health insurance. She said, you have? I said, no, I haven't. She goes, you have. I've been paying it because I knew this day was coming.
Terrific.
And I went, wow. I drove around to her house. At this stage, my son Lewis was on the Gold Coast in Queensland and probably wasn't subject to the same that my son Mitch was subject to, who was 15 at the time. Mm-hmm. I went into the house and I said, Jude, thank you very much. You're an amazing person. This lady, this wife, she's never asked me what happened, ever. All she ever said is, Rick, we all make mistakes. It's what you do about it. From this day forward will determine your 2 sons' lives.
Rick, at what stage did you sort of part company?
We parted company 2 years after probably all of that, but we're very good friends. She's a great mother to my 2 sons.
That's amazing.
Very supportive all the time with me.
Beautiful.
I said, is there anything I can do, Jude, to pay you back? And she said, how long are you going for? I said, I'm going for a month. She said, if you come back in 2 weeks, I'll stab you. I said, all right. And I turned to my son, Mitch. Mitch had sent me an email 4 weeks before this that said, and just put yourself in this position, if you got an email like this, hey, I've lost my dad, my heart is broken, and I've lost my footy coach. And I looked at that email and went, oh my God, you've got to do something. I turned to Mitch and I said, Mitch, is there anything I can do for you? And he didn't look up. I said, please, Mitch, is there anything I can do for you? And Jude said, look, get going, Rick. I think it's a great idea to come. And I said, no, please, Mitch, is there anything I can do for you? And this will haunt me till the day I die. He looked up and he said, yep, I just want my dad back. All I want's my dad back.
How old was Mitch then?
Mitch was 15, 16.
Well, he's got his dad back
and
now.
To this day, that changed my life forever. I drove out of that house. I went around the corner. I cried for an hour and a half. I got on the plane. I went to Currumbin Clinic. I got off the plane. I walked in. The first phone call I got was from Granny Peg in Bendigo. And for people who worry about, are having tough times, I give the people this lesson every day of the week who call me for message me on Facebook and all sorts of things wanting help. She rang me and she said, "Now, Rick, I know you're up in that hospital place," she said, "but they can't help you up there. There's only one person can help you." And I said, "Who?" She goes, "You." She said, "Now I want you to do 3 things." She said, "I want you to go into the bathroom every day, get out of bed. The hardest thing to do when you're down and out and you're stressed is to get out of bed. Get out of bed, go into the bathroom, look in the mirror and smile." And I said, "How's that going to help me?" She said, "I'll tell you how it helps you, Rick. It creates excitement genes in your head and your day will get off to a good start." So I do it every day. She then said, "I want you to go for a walk and I want you to put your phone, earplugs on, and I want you to play that cold stuff." And I said, "What cold stuff? Snow stuff?" She goes, "No, that cold stuff." I said, "Cold chisel?" She goes, "Yeah, them, play them." I said, "Rightio." So, and look at photos of your kids and that. So the next day, I got up at 6, 8, and one very important last thing she said to me. She said, "And one other thing, Rick, don't let the bastards beat you." And what she meant by that was people would think the media were like, no, she meant the bastards in your head.
Oh.
This is a very famous, I didn't know, quote from my great-great-grandfather who was 14, stole out from Ireland on a ship, dived overboard in Adelaide, hid in the forest for 6 months, and then carted tobacco from Adelaide to Melbourne, got held up by bushrangers. He took the whole 6 of them on, and when he beat them all, they all had guns and everything. The people said that was amazing. He goes, "You just never let the bastards beat you." And that's been handed down over the years.
But this is your grandmother, is it?
Yeah, so my grandmother, who was in her 90s,
God bless
his mother lived to well over 100, so God forbid if I kept living that long. But when I went for a walk the next day, I've gone along the beach, I'm looking at photos of my kids, I'm listening to music. I came around the corner and there was this hill, and I said to this girl who was running, I said, "Excuse me, sorry to stop you, but how far is it up that hill?" She said, "Oh, it's about 4 Ks." And I went, when I was 15, One Tree Hill made me in Bendigo. That made me an AFL player at 3 clubs. That made me a sports agent because I knew climbing hills and getting over the other side was a challenge. So I ran up that hill. Well, I walked up it actually. It took me 28 days to run to the top, but when I got to the top, I went back to Currumbin Clinic. I was laying in bed, and on the TV they were talking about what's the hardest thing to do in the world, and this panel in America was saying the hardest thing to do is public speaking, and this guy said, "No, it's not. The hardest thing to do in the world is be a stand-up comedian." And I went, "I'm going to do that. I'm going to do that." I don't know whether I'm funny, but if that's the hardest thing to do, I can't go back to sports management. If you're down and out and you're stressed or whatever else, everybody's got talent. You've got to find that talent. I reckon I was funny at school. I was great at creative writing. So I had, suddenly my Facebook page exploded. Like I got 100,000 people on there now, and it's all based around your educational stuff on footy, but also being a little bit funny. So what I did was said I was going to do stand-up comedy. The Herald Sun wrote a double-page spread that I was the unfunniest bloke in Australia, that people should protest against me. All this, like, where is all this coming from? What they don't write is my first 3 shows had 400 people there, more than the comedy festival gets.
Fantastic.
And to this day, I still go out to footy clubs and tell a bit of comedy, but also do my life story like this. So,
Ricky, amazing.
So that trip to Currumbin was what sparked my life back together.
And how long ago was that?
That was 2012. And then my family, as I said, have been so supportive. My son Lewis sent me a text message saying, "Jude wants you to come over for dinner. We all want to get together." And Dad, we did it. That text message is now my screensaver on my computer. We did it because we did it as a family. And when I got over there, Lewis said, "Dad, we did it," and Mitch said, "No, but that's not the best thing. The best thing is I got my dad back."
Oh, Ricky,
and that breaks your heart.
Thank you so much. I'd love to have you on again now that people know the story, but just to help people who are going through a difficult time and maybe wanting to suicide. But congratulations on a really successful life, mate.
Thank you.
I think the best is yet to come.
I hope so.
You're the comeback king, mate, and thank you very much for watching. I certainly got a lot of inspiration. I'm going to start smiling a bit more in the mirror because we all get down from time to time. Love and best wishes. Good night. We'll see you next week.